So to start with, I'm going to talk about coloured paper, and I'll move on to the different types of book page paper later. So for making the flowers like my English roses, my tea roses, or my hybrid roses, and even my blossom, I'll tend to use a variety of different coloured papers. So most of my flowers are made using 120 GSM to 150 GSM paper, and I mostly use matte paper, but occasionally I opt for a pearlescent or a shimmer finish. But again, we'll come to that in just a little while. I have tried using paper that is less than 120 GSM, and although it will still work, the paper is very fragile and can crease very easily. For the tea roses and the English roses, the hybrid roses, and even my standard Novella rose if you did that in colour, I will use between 120 and 150 GSM. I tend to favour the Daler Rowney paper for the bright, vibrant colours, but the downside to the Daler Rowney range is that they don't have a lot of soft pastel colours, so I do get my pastel colours and my pearlescent and shimmer papers online. So with any paper over 140 GSM, if you're making the whole rose, especially an English rose, then you may need a glue gun to finish off at the end, and this is because the paper is a lot thicker, it's less pliant, and it takes longer for the wallpaper paste to absorb into the paper. For the leaves, you can go up to 300 GSM, a thin card really, or even a thick card. But for the wired leaves, I would generally stick with 150 GSM. Again, I don't like using the really thin paper, even 120 is a bit too thin for leaves. So yeah, anything heavier than thin card just won't be bendable on the wire. So for paper with a sheen or a pearlescent finish or a glossy finish, the petals and the wallpaper paste will not work quite so well together. So if you're using a paper with a gloss finish, and that includes picture books as well, do substitute the wallpaper paste for a high-tack glue. I will do a tutorial on how to use the glossy paper at some point, but that's not going to happen in the next few months because I've got the next few months scheduled, but I will. If you do substitute the wallpaper paste for the high-tack glue, take your time and keep the thread binding really nice and tight, and have a glue gun to hand because you may still need to fall back on it. The problem is that the petals, because they're shiny, they tend to slip whilst you're binding, so you might need a little bit more patience, or you might prefer to use a glue gun in that instance. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say about the coloured paper. So, book pages. Some people do exclaim, "How could you cut up a book?" Or, "I could never cut up a book." Well, I'm not out to change anyone's opinion, but to me, it is just paper. Of course, I would never ever cut up one of my own favourite personal books. The ones that I've turned the pages of, the ones that are inscribed, the ones that I've turned down the corner of a page down as a place marker. No, I would never cut up one of my favourite books. Those are my books, and I will read them and I will reread them as I have done in the past, and as I still am going back and rereading all my favourite books. So yeah, I wouldn't cut up my favourite books. I don't recommend you cut up your favourite books. You can get them so cheaply in charity shops and discount bookstores if you don't want to spend a lot of money on a copy. But I would happily buy a copy, another copy to use in my flower making. And these are copies of a book. And picking up a pre-loved or a discarded book, it's then just paper to me, because it's not one that I've turned the pages of. These have been given away, and I suppose someone might ask, do I feel bad about taking that book away from someone who actually wanted to read it? Well, no, because in general, the books that I end up buying, you can walk into any charity shop on the high street, and let's be quite honest, there are several on every high street these days, and you will see a Jane Austen book, you will see an Emily Bronte book, you will see, who are the other popular ones? A Harry Potter book. You'll see much loved, pre-loved Harry Potter books. you'll see oodles of copies of Alice in Wonderland, and who else is really popular? Yeah, like the Twilight Saga. You know, all of the books that get requested for flower making, really, they are very popular books. You can pick them up pretty much anywhere. And if I can't pick them up anywhere, I don't feel bad about going and buying a brand new copy, so long as it's in print. I would never ever use a book that's out of print for making my flowers, because then I might be taking a book away from somebody who might want to read it. And I'd also never ever cut up a first edition. I always check whenever I pick up a book in a charity shop, and if I do find one that's a first edition, I'll pass it on. So yeah, I'm keeping books in print, so that's fine. And also, I don't think people really have any idea that so many books go to landfill. It's incredible. Anyway, yes, I would never ever use first edition. So book pages generally don't come with a GSM, so you're working with what you've got. And in some books the pages are a lot thicker than in others. Hardbacks tend to have quite thick pages, and paperbacks, particularly some of the cheaper copies that you can get, they usually have quite thin paper. And obviously the thin paper isn't as good for making roses with. So if you are looking to make roses, you want to find a paper that isn't too thick but isn't too thin. So as a guide, the current editions of Harry Potter, that paper is perfect. Some of the older copies of Harry Potter, that paper's no good. It's too thin. So you want to find a paper that is typical summer novel reading, that kind of thickness of paper. The other thing to be aware of when you're making flowers is the older the book, the yellower the pages are going to be. Some books have very bright paper and some books have darker paper, and the font colour and the typeface also make a big difference to the end result of the rose. So you can see the older the book, the more yellow the pages, and if it's a really old book, the pages will be very yellow around the margin, and that can be quite a nice effect, really. It saves you having to stain them if someone's requested it. Some books have thicker margins than others, so sometimes you'll need to trim them down, otherwise you'll just get lots of blank margin on your petals. Some books you can get 3 cuts of petals from, and other books you can get 4. Some are so small that you can't even fold the paper in half for cutting the petals out. Personally, I prefer the books that have a nice crisp background and a nice wide font. Poetry books, for example, you can only use the middle bit of the text because it's all down the page, so you have to be quite careful with how you cut the petals. For English roses, I tend to prefer using hardback books because the hardback books have thicker paper, and so when you're curling the petals, they tend to hold the petal curls a bit better. So yes, for English roses and tea roses, I would definitely recommend using the paper from a hardback book, and for all the other roses, paperback books are perfectly fine.